Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Rise 8 Prodacity livestream series. Today, we'll be talking with Janice Frazier about how to go farther and faster with far less drama. Now, if you want to see her talk from Prodacity 2022, please head over to rise8.us/events/Prodacity. It's definitely a must watch. You can also register there for updates about our 2023 event. Now, Janice has built a storied career in Silicon Valley as a startup founder, product manager, and confidant for entrepreneurs and enterprise executives alike. Her exuberant big stage keynotes and practical, empathetic brown bag talks have become cult favorites. One of my personal favorites, head over to YouTube and just search for Balanced Team Janice Frazier. It's an oldie, but like one of my favorite talks on products and balanced teams. Now, Janice's hobbies include healing generational trauma, something we all need in the workplace, challenging the patriarchy, and icing migraines. Together, Janice and her husband, Jason Frazier, wrote the book Farther, Faster, and Far Less Drama, which we'll be talking about today. The two of them have coached hundreds of teams and delivered workshops and talks to conferences and organizations around the world. And their influence has been felt in startups, federal governments, including organizations I got the privilege to work with them with, nonprofits, mom and pop shops, venture firms, and even top business schools like Kellogg, Haas, Harvard, and Stanford. So Janice, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And, I want to say one thing about that bio that you just read. And, I hesitated when we were creating our author bios for the book. I hesitated to include the real story of like, what do I actually do in my spare time? But I wanted to include it because you know what? You never know what someone's going through. Mm-hmm. Like you show up in the workplace every day and you're your whole self, whether you want to be or not. And so the truth is that half the time that I show up to work, I have a migraine because that's just my life. And, I want to normalize just like seeing each other as real people and leading anyway. Right. So I just wanted to it was a weird thing to put in a bio, a professional bio, but there you go. That's who I am.
I actually love it. I love it. I love it. I wish more bios were like that. Maybe to start, could you tell us a little bit about this book you wrote and why you wrote it?
Yeah, sure. This book is a labor of love. I wrote it with Jason, my husband, who you know very well. And the two of us have had these sort of parallel career experiences, sometimes working together, sometimes separately. And over the last 20 years, 25 years, maybe more, I don't know, we started to see patterns in how our favorite leaders created just really extraordinary progress and without a lot of fuss, right? The best leaders aren't necessarily the ones that look the most like big name, heroic, like Steve Jobs level, like I'm on top of the mountain, right? It's more that there are these people who are just like quietly effective everywhere they go. They're making change, they're leading. And we wanted to notice and document what we saw as repeatable patterns so that we ourselves could do it and so that we could support others. We do a lot of consulting work or advising startups or what have you. And we wanted to just make it repeatable. We wanted to name it, describe it, so that we could go farther, get there faster. And Lord, I have enough drama in my life, Same. All over the place. So I just don't want any more. I want less drama. And so that's kind of why we did it. So this is 3 years of effort on top of 20 years of learning, observing, watching, and trying things.
Yeah, I love that. It really resonates with my own personal experience with leadership too, especially in the military. A lot of the best leaders are kind of like quiet lurker. Like you just don't realize how much of an impact they're making behind the scenes. Yeah. And they do it everywhere they go. They're very consistent. So I love it. All right. So you did share a glimpse of your new book with us at Prodacity. You highlighted one of the 4 leadership motions. Talk to us about the 4 leadership motions. What are they? Maybe just like high level first, and then we'll go into each one.
Yep. So we organized the book into these 4 sections that are 4 leadership motions, and we called them that. It was kind of hard to figure out how to describe them, how to name them. But what we wanted to do was name things that a leader can do in any situation, in any context, to reliably go faster, reduce drama, et cetera. And so these are behaviors. These are like things you can do right now in any context. And so the first one is orient honestly. And I really do think it comes first. Obviously, this is not a process model. You can do these in any order you want, but it always helps to get very clear about where we are in this moment and what makes this moment complicated. So speaking to a military audience, you understand situational awareness, right? And situational awareness, it's not enough to tell the happy picture. You have to tell the picture that is true, that is complicated, because if it wasn't complicated, you wouldn't need, there wouldn't be a problem that you had to solve. So orient honestly, it's really about, if you think about a point A to point B kind of journey, it's about defining that point A, and we give some really concrete, repeatable techniques for how to do that. The second one is about the point B part. That's value outcomes. And so we all make these plans, right? And we can get really wrapped up in executing according to plan. But when you're in dynamic circumstances, the plan that you made, a month ago, a year ago, just might not get you to that desired outcome. So it's not that planning and plans aren't important. It's that the outcome you're aiming for is far more important. So you need to be able to release the pressure to create flexibility in our plans. And so that's what that one is. Then the third one is make durable decisions. And I'll talk about leverage the brains last. Making durable decisions. So decision making as a construct is very wasteful in organizations. And the waste comes in two places: before the moment that a decision is made and after the moment a decision is made. And so before, it's like having unrealistic standards. Is it the right decision? Is it the best decision? Do we have full consensus? Does everyone agree? All of those are kind of unrealistic. Like, there's no way to know if it's the best decision. Like, how could you possibly know? So we're striving for something that is unachievable. And so for that, the solve is simply to change the standard that you're going for. Does this move us toward our outcome in an efficient, effective way? And can we all live with it? Right? A much simpler conversation to have than, does everybody agree 100% that this is the right thing to do? Like, no, we'll talk about that first. So we eliminate waste there. And then after a decision is made, if insufficient conversation has happened, then decisions get relitigated and revisited and reversed. And so what we want to do are find ways to make decisions that are resilient to challenge, so that someone can come back and go like, you know what, I had a second thought. Okay, but it turns out we actually did process this right. That was the right call. So then you're not, kind of reversing yourself after you started to take action. Now, the final one, leverage the brains. Leverage the brains, I focused on a lot at Prodacity, in part because of the context of the conference. It felt like the right one to focus on. I would say it's not necessarily more important than everything else, but it's the one that I think involves the most mindset change for leadership. I think a lot of us, particularly in federal contexts, are taught that leaders know things and that leaders decide things. And that knowing mindset is literally the opposite of what we need, in a growth mindset. So there's a lot of talk about what is growth mindset. Well, people with a growth mindset rely on everybody else to help make them smart and make them have good decisions. And so the first instinct is, who are the brains that I need to leverage? And so we talk a lot about who are the brains, what are the three kinds of people you should invite to any decision-making effort, and so forth. So those are the 4 leadership motions. And anytime you're challenged, you can say, what might I do right now to value the outcomes? What might I do right now to make this decision a little bit more durable? What might I do, et cetera. So that's the book. There you go. Okay, we're done, right?
Yeah. So leverage the brains is always the one I get focused on. So I'll go back to the beginning so I don't over-rotate on that. On orient honestly, one thing that I see happen quite often, particularly in government, right? Because we're spending taxpayer money, Congress is calling and asking us questions. We get so caught up in selling the vision which is also important, right? You have to cast that vision. But nobody wants to talk about how bad things really are, particularly if they don't have a scapegoat, like, oh, that was the last person that served in this role, right?
Right.
And so do you have any techniques for getting people to get past that and be able to talk, very openly and honestly about things that aren't going well, which most digital organizations are not doing well?
Yeah. So really that speaks to psychological safety. And, in government context, in federal context, the oversight is a really important function, right? I'm not myself employed at the federal level, but I am a taxpayer and I have worked a lot in that context. And I know how sensitive both transparency, but also complexity are, right? So it's a very complex context in which you operate with a lot of different factors. And so in order to really be able to talk about the hard parts, the really hard parts, you need to create a small group within which you have psychological safety and trust. And now there's actually just been published by an author that I just met. Her name is Minette Norman. And the book is called The Psychological Safety Playbook. And it's a very small book. It's 25 plays that you can do right now to create psychological safety. So we talk some about psychological safety in the book, not a ton, but that overcoming the fear of telling the truth is essential in order to create real solutions that actually move you forward. So step one is create a small group of people that you feel safe with. And step two is everything else.
I love that. Have you seen, so one thing that's interesting about the Kessel Run story, which you were involved with us, and especially Jason, during Kessel Run, was two of us, Adam Furtado and myself, both came out of the targeting career field, did a lot of the air operations type of work. And we were just very loud about how broken the systems were because we used them and we had been frustrated. And that was our whole purpose for being there. And so do you think that approach that we took, because I have been challenged that I didn't create psychological safety, actually, and that I actually made it a pretty unsafe environment for a lot of those stakeholders who I was basically calling to the carpet in front of people. It moved the ball forward, but it may have had repercussions later. What would you say to somebody that's in that state? Like, what's a better approach that I could have taken?
Well, I mean, you and I are cut from the same cloth. Like, I walk into context and I'm like, well, look at what's the problem here. Like, let's talk about the hard stuff. And it doesn't always make me popular, but it does often make change happen. And the advice that I always give, and I advise a lot of entrepreneurs and internal change makers in very large organizations, right? Very mega corporations. And if you're going to be the person that tells the truth in a very loud way, you need to know the impact that your actions will have before you do it. You need to know, be mindful that you are making the world uncomfortable for this other person and that there might be blowback on yourself. And so, I believe that sometimes it's necessary to say the obvious but unspoken truth in order to create awareness and change. I also believe that if you say the truth, you're doing it for the public good or for the larger outcome, then it can be a very effective way to move forward. But it's important not to do that in a way that puts yourself at risk, right? So you and I believe Adam had arrived at a place where you felt like the risk to you personally was less important than the good you would be doing by calling it out and telling the truth. And, often at least speaking for myself, I'm more or less mindful sometimes, right? Like I'm not always like doing it consciously. As I've grown more mature as a leader, I have become more strategic about how and when I do that. The way to to make that situation more safe is to call those people out privately, or in a smaller group, where they can save face. So I'm not a political maneuverer. Like, that's why I work for myself and I'm an independent, and, you know, my shelf life at a company is about 2 years. And it's because I don't have those, you know, the gentleness that, for instance, Jason, my husband and co-author, does, right? He probably would have a much different answer, and probably a better answer. And you benefited from that. I mean, you saw his he's very level, he's very calm. He's better at indirect speech, whereas I'm going to come in there and just say what I see.
Yeah. Well, I think that it brings up an interesting point, which is like the two of you are better together, and sure. Hopefully in your marriage as well. But like, from
100%.
I know for me, going and seeking a lot of like, I sought out Jason, and I often disagree with Jason. I'm usually probably more aligned with you, but seeking out those people that have those disagreements, I think, really helped me move forward. And we'll talk about one of those in a bit. So on valuing outcomes, the big challenge I'm seeing in federal government is just a complete lack of measurement. Is that something you see more broadly, or is that more targeted here? And what can people do to better maybe even set up the framework to be able to measure, but then go ahead and measure those outcomes and keep them as the focus?
Yeah, measurement is a lot easier outside of a federal context, right? Because you're able to count the money, right? You're able to, draw very straight lines between this thing we did led to this many customers buying, led to this amount of revenue, led to this pricing strategy. So a commercial context, it's easier. When you're in a mission-driven context, whether that's federal government or some other impact type mission, the measurements and the metrics that one uses often become very metaphorical, or very, very much proxies of the outcome you wish to have. And that does complicate things. It makes them a little bit less believable. It makes them a little bit less, it's a little less measurable. And what I believe is that the attempt to measure is often the most important part, because it creates what you want. The purpose of measurement is twofold. Maybe it's more than that, but off the top of my head, I would say two things about measurement. One is it does help you know whether or not you're approaching the impact you want to have, whether that's a financial impact or some other impact. On the other hand, it allows the people doing the work to think through, what might we do? It's a structure for critical thinking. So the attempt to measure, even the unmeasurable, creates a critical thinking effort that allows you to choose the right moves that will get you the impact you want. So it's almost like the measurement itself is less important than the attempt to measure. And so, I do see this, and I see it all over the place. Like, I see metrics coming into fashion and then falling out of fashion. And so I've been in Silicon Valley 30 years now, and it goes in waves. Like, it's like, okay, John Doerr wrote a book about, KPIs. And so everyone's interested in KPIs, and, and the same was true when Eric Ries wrote The Lean Startup. Everyone was like, all right, what are we learning? What are our learning metrics? And, and then people get sick of that, and they change their minds. And so it comes and goes in waves, but the attempt to measure creates critical thinking that is essential to delivering an outcome.
That's so beneficial. I have always, I think, felt that. I've never been able to put words to it. So I'm excited to be able to talk with people about that, because one thing, with Rise 8 in our consulting side of the house, a lot of times we're helping people with goaling systems. And those first iterations are so painful, and a lot of folks give up on them pretty early. And I think it's, we're looking for the metric, the like end result, versus that process. Or what was the saying we used to have? Is it like a user story as a placeholder for a conversation, or something like that?
Yeah.
It's like
something like that. Yep.
Yeah. It's almost like we're valuing the conversation and the ideas that it generates and the type of thinking. I really love that. I'm going to take that one with me. So I learned something today, and I'm excited. Making durable decisions was the third one that you mentioned. I have, this one is really painful. I think, in all organizations, commercial
really
and elsewhere.
painful.
Yeah. There's a lot of leaders who maybe this isn't their intent, but it's like a lot of leadership by who I spoke to last. That's what I always call it. And everybody is then vying to like backdoor information to that leader and be the last person to talk to them or the most frequent person to talk to them.
Yep.
What are some strategies to, if you're the person in an organization where people are backdooring that leader, maybe you're not that ultimate decision maker, how can you help alleviate some of that?
I think it starts with who should be involved in the decision. So I've been in many organizations that have tried to improve decision making through, decision rights models like RACI, and have adapted them to be their own, and they somehow just never. I mean, those models are all accurate. Like those are the correct ways to think about decision making, but behaviorally they just don't function because of the dynamics that you said, like people will backdoor or whatever. But if you start with a conversation of who should be involved in this decision and what is the mechanic by which we're going to make a decision, then at least you have something that leader needs to deviate from. So they're deviating consciously. So if we say, for instance, so I say there are 3 kinds of people that need to be involved in every decision, in any decision. The people with the authority to say yes, right? So there are lots of people often who can say no, but you need someone involved who has the authority to say yes. The people with the subject matter expertise, right? So you need knowledgeable people they have the context. So you had context about the targeting systems. You were the subject matter expert on the problem that needed to be solved, right? So someone can say yes, someone knows what they're talking about. And then the third is the people who have to live with the outcome. And this is often those, what we call the detail buyers, the ones who can like just raise all kinds of trouble after a decision has been made. And that third kind of people are often overlooked. So in a commercial context, you often get like the customer service people are left out of some major decision that's going to just like blow up their phones. And they know exactly like that is the wrong direction, but they're all overlooked. So this is how you end up with a multi-level cross-disciplinary decision team. But it's a small decision team. And each one of those people, you can have 1, 2, 3, whatever, but each of those are representing a collection of needs, knowledge, context, et cetera. So if upfront on a decision that might be controversial, you say, and once you get good at this, by the way, these conversations are super fast, right? So you say, who can say yes, who knows what they're talking about, and who has to live with this at the end. Get those people together, decide either collectively or just through some other means, decide how are we going to make this decision. And we give a few decision-making models in the book. Right? How are we going to make this decision? Now, every time a backdoor conversation goes, that leader now has it in their head that we've made these agreements. We've got some increasing commitment to a path. And if I have those conversations, I am now breaching those agreements that we already made. So you're kind of like, it changes the culture when you are explicit about who's involved and how are we going to make the decision, so that over time, that those backdoor conversations are a little bit more accountable, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. And I think it's, like I said, it's definitely one of the things that I've experienced a lot, particularly in federal, where there's very centralized decision making, and a lot of time a lack of the subject matter expertise, like immediately surrounding that leader, usually, right? A lot of times I have some expertise in targeting, right? But there's all sorts of subject matter experts that we need to bring together for those kinds of things. They were not at Kessel Run, right? Or I could use a lot of other examples, but like a lot of times they're external.
Let's roll with that for a minute. So let's say that your job in that decision, whatever we're not even talking about a real decision here, but like, let's say there was a decision to make. And I said, Brian, I need you to represent the subject matter expertise. Can you please go find out what you need to know, what you think is important? So it creates sort of an implicit prompt that you now have a role to represent the best current thinking. And so if you're going to do a good job, you're going to go find out what is the best current thinking. And without that implicit prompt, nobody would do that work. Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have that exact person in the room. And some of these people, like, you probably don't want them in the room because they're like, you know, they're just kind of way off in, you know, science and math land or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's about the role that one plays in the decision making, and is very much like a balanced team approach. You can see it's a balanced team approach to decision making.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those that are listening, I think this plays out a lot in the IT landscape in government, because we like to bring people in from Silicon Valley to help us digitally transform, like in government roles sometimes, other times as contractors. But those folks often don't know anything about defense information system networks.
It's true. And they're different.
Yeah. And so, like, an example, I recently had somebody in this network of, you know, the innovation ecosystem. They had a leader come in from industry and was like, we're going all in on this particular, you know, technology and provider. And it's like, all right, well, your customers are all on Five Eye, which is a coalition network. Right. And that cloud is not available on that coalition network. It's a solvable problem, right? I mean, we can solve the problem for sure, but you need somebody there telling you that and making sure you understand all the intricacies of that so that you can architect for that. Even just from a raw, like, they thought, you know, a lot of people would view that as a very raw technical decision, but like huge subject matter expertise implications. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Okay, so the last one, the one I always over-rotate on, leverage the brains. Tell me what you mean by leverage the brains.
Well, and you know, this is another disclaimer moment, because like, leverage the brains is a pretty weird phrase. But over time, you know, we tried other ways to describe this. And this is like over time, like a decade, we were like, what do we really mean here? And we mean two things. We mean, like, we need all of the cognitive horsepower. It's like we need to add more processors to our array, right? That's what leveraging the brains is. So we need more horsepower, more compute power. We need more knowledge memory storage, right? So really the brain, that mechanism of all these delicious, beautiful brains. And then we need leverage, right? I, as a leader, I know that I'm fallible. I know that I don't have all the context. I know that I don't have all the knowledge. I know that if I made a snap decision, I'm known for making very fast decisions, right? And if I make a snap decision, given my limited capacity, my limited knowledge and storage, even though I'm very knowledgeable in my field, right? If I do that alone, I'm going to mess it up. But if I have ways to, you know, we use the word collaborate a lot in our business culture these days, and, you know, design thinking and all of these techniques for collaboration is great. But I don't really mean collaboration. When I'm in the leadership position, I need leverage and I need the right brains, right? And it takes the form of collaboration, but that's not the goal. The goal is to make things move faster and mess up less and get traction and momentum. And so I need leverage, and I'm going to get that leverage by, you know, adding more compute power and more RAM and more storage in the form of brains. So that's how we got there. That's what we mean by it.
Okay. And going with maybe a concrete example, because I already mentioned your talk, the balanced team. If I'm going to go build a web app or some type of similar product, historically, I would say you've said kind of the minimum balance team there is product manager, designer, and engineering. And then maybe other disciplines as needed to leverage the brains. Data intensive project might bring a data engineer, et cetera. But let's just go with a very simple, that's your balanced team. Are you seeing that is taking hold in industry? Because I will tell you, in federal government, I could barely ever get people to put a product manager on a contract.
Sure.
They're like, oh, we've got program managers. Like, no, not a program manager, a product manager. And UX is usually out the window. I mean, it is a battle to get designers on projects.
Yeah. Well, the word design has become problematic. You know, I started a design company in the year 2000, and it was a user experience firm. And even then, design was perceived as something frivolous. It was something that was really, the idea was, we actually had a client once back in 2002 that had a phrase, SUAC, shut up and color. And so what I mean by design, I actually respect visual design, communication design quite a lot. I think it's an extraordinary discipline. But what I'm talking about here, when we say design, we're talking about structure and function and organization of the tools and the controls. It's sort of like, the kind of designing the cockpit of an airplane, like so that a human can use it. You need someone who can do that at a professional level. So I hear the problem. It is a persistent, pernicious problem. When I started at Pivotal, when Jason and I joined the team at Pivotal Labs in 2014, the ratio of designers to developers was 1 designer for 50 developers, 50. And when I left 2 years later, he's still there. When I left 2 years later, the ratio was 1 designer to 5 engineers. And that was a recognition that even on highly technical kind of products, we need someone who at a professional level can translate intention into human behavior. I mean, what you're trying to do with software development, I haven't had this conversation in a long time, but basically what you're trying to do with software development is manipulate human behavior through a 2-dimensional screen, right? With very limited tool set. And that's a very complicated behavioral psychology challenge, right? It's behavioral psychology and behavioral economics. And like, how do I get somebody to push the right button at the right time for the right outcome? And anyway, so obviously I'm an advocate for user experience, product design, et cetera. Is it taking hold? Well, sure, it's taking hold in places where people have experienced it. What I have found is that once a software developer experiences life with a balanced team, they mostly don't want to go back. Mm-hmm. The problem is learning how to tell the story that justifies what appears like an expense. And it's like having the right tooling. If you're manufacturing something, you need the right tools. And in this case, I don't mean to dehumanize people, but I mean people, right? You need the right tools to create the right outcome, the right product. And so I find that engineering talent, engineering people tend to value it once they have experienced life with it. Presuming that you have good team dynamics. If you have the wrong team structure, which is where balanced team comes in. So, I think a lot of organizations feel like it would be more effective to set up a product manager or a lead engineer as the decider, the decision maker, the organizer of all the work. But again, in a balanced team, we want to allocate the decision-making and the visioning to the people that have the most expertise in that area. So is that enough? I don't want to go too deep into balanced team because I could talk about that forever.
I will refer people to your talk because it is brilliant and definitely is a must watch. Like folks, if this is interesting to you at all, please go watch it. I think one note that I'll just make, having observed, we're doing a big compensation study at Rise 8. We're growing, and so we're really revisiting that. And so I've been doing a lot of research into. We have balanced teams, always balanced teams, and the salaries. And it's interesting to see the growth trajectory of UX in particular. It just shows me that it's being valued more, at least in large tech companies. Like if you go to levels.fyi and look at, all the FANG, if you pull up the FANG and switch between software engineer and software designer, they're getting very close, which is another thing that we struggle with in federal is rates. Pricing is always a difficult thing in federal, but when I propose a designer or even a product manager at a very similar rate to a product engineer, people's heads explode. They're like, oh, well, I can get this PMP over here with a Scrum certification for like, $50 an hour or so, just these crazy things. Whereas a product manager in Silicon Valley usually makes more than the senior engineer on the team.
Well, and for good reason. So that $50 an hour person, with respect to people who are early career, usually the job is defined as, shoveling stories into a backlog, right? That's it. And it's not a strategic function, and it's not a it's almost the what their expectation is, the administrative side of what the kind of product manager that you're talking about. So, we can have a conversation about how to pitch unpopular things to your clients and what are the strategies that I've seen win from a consulting context. But some of the techniques that I have seen are blended rate, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a blended rate. So you're going to pay the same rate for everybody per body. That's what Pivotal always did. Mm-hmm. I like blended rates because it means that you don't get into that conversation about, do I want more engineers? Do I want a designer? And some clients are not willing to go or not able to go down that path for whatever reason. They need to have levels and have rates per kind of headcount. The other thing is, well, if you think that engineering time is precious, then you'd better get your ducks in a row before your engineer has to touch it. Yes. Because re-engineering things is way more costly than doing it right the first time. Doing it more right, there's no such thing as right, doing it more right the first time, which means that you need somebody who, as a professional, at a professional level, can understand what the need is and can create a more right solution for that engineer to then go build.
All right. I want to go back to something that you said when we were talking about durable decisions. You talked about the people who have to live with the consequences of the decision or the outcome of the decision. Mm-hmm. And to some, that might sound a little bit like, I need to go get buy-in, but I know you do not believe in buy-in.
Yeah. So I just think that the phrase, I hate the phrase buy-in. And, I know it's tilting at windmills to say that I want to eradicate the word buy-in. It's kind of like saying I hate meetings and I won't have them, which I also say, by the way. But here's the problem with buy-in. It's vague. You don't know if you really have it. Nobody's defined it. You don't know if you're keeping it. We forget to maintain it, right? We forget to keep, you thought you had buy-in on Tuesday, and by Friday, the last person to talk to that leader you were mentioning, like the last person in the door changed his mind or her mind. So I think that buy-in is just not specific enough to be actionable. And what I want is, I want things I can do, right?
Yes.
I am, believe it or not a very persuasive person. So anything as subtle and vague as buy-in is just not clear enough for my pea brain here. So instead, I have a whole chapter, Jason and I have a whole chapter in the book on UBAD. And UBAD it's a dumb word, right? But it stands for understanding, belief, advocacy, decision-making. And I basically use it as a diagnostic model to know where someone is in their support of an idea or a decision. So the first two are like what I'm looking for. I'm really looking for, do they understand? And do they believe? And so that's where we're like, that's about teaching and training and whatever. And then kind of the next level of test is, when they talk about it, are they talking about it in a way that kind of that lends their credibility to it? Are they talking about it in a way that creates an assumption that they support it? Right? So are they advocating for the decision? And then are they making decisions in alignment? I mean, that's really where you put your money where your mouth is. Are you going to decide in a way, minor decisions in a way that is in alignment with that advocacy, right? Or is it just lip service? So I use it as a diagnostic model, and I use it to help me know when I need to uncover objections. So, if I don't hear somebody advocating for a position, or if they talk about it, but without lending their weight to it, then I'm like, is it that they don't understand, or is it that they understand but don't yet believe? And that allows me then to have different kinds of conversations, ask different questions, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I had a very early experience with Jason, as you know. I think you've heard this story, but I can be very persuasive, sometimes in the good way, a lot of times by filibuster, but you know, I kept finding that these decisions that I was getting people to would get reversed, right? I would get them to the decision I wanted, and then either we wouldn't follow through or we would start and they would back out. Mm-hmm. And I kept blaming it on all these terrible leaders, all these terrible stakeholders. I mean, I was like really negative on people, on individuals. And Jason wrote up on the board, they're bad, right? There. And he kept saying every time something goes wrong, you say they're bad, but the truth is you bad. And he walked me through this framework, which is a subtle Jason way of telling me that I needed improvement.
Yeah, he also says a thing about with, not at, mm-hmm. right? You have to work with people, not at people. And I think that these go together. You know, if you're working with someone, your goal has to be to understand them and to see that they understand you or your position. And they're going to choose to believe or not believe based on their own insights. And your one's job as someone who's trying to gain buy-in, even though I hate that term, is to uncover what the objections are that are preventing them from believing. Mm-hmm. And often the objections have nothing to do with the subject matter. It has everything to do with, them being confused or them being in a political corner. And, so you just, or honestly, maybe they're just icing their migraine. Like, who knows what is going on? And our job as an empathetic partner to that person is to understand why, and smart people can disagree. Like, sorry, Brian, you're not always going to get your way. But you can make really bold asks and you can make a lot of progress if you, really take this kind of an approach to make sure that understanding and belief are there, and that you can see evidence of that in their behaviors, the advocacy and decision-making.
Yeah. And a success story from Kessel Run, we were still very much struggling at this point. And I view it as a game-changing moment. That day I went back to the entire leadership team and several of our high-performing individual contributors. And I was like, we have to get people to understand. We actually built, and I don't always recommend this format because we talked at people.
Yeah. Did those people want to understand?
They did. So that was what was really nice. We infamously refer to it as the Zobel brief. I still have a copy of it. Brief was not the right word for it because it was 8 hours long. 8 hours.
Holy moly.
Yeah, we did 4 hours in the morning and 4 hours in the afternoon. It was all education. Not that she needed to be educated per se. It was specific to Kessel Run, what we were doing at Kessel Run, why, how. And it was a turning point. There were several other people in attendance, obviously, key stakeholders and folks. And I view that as one of the turning points, not just with our stakeholders, but then also internally, because it forced us to educate ourselves, fill in a lot of logical gaps that we had. And, we also turned that inward and talked to the team about a lot of these things. So, understanding, belief, advocacy, decisions. We found that our product managers were making better decisions and our stakeholders were making better decisions.
Oh, that's great. Well, and one of the things I really respect about there, you're like, I'm going to talk at you for 8 hours is a little bit of a why would you do that? But it's sort of cultural. I have found, at least in the Air Force, in the work that I've done there, that people are used to briefings. They're used to receiving information in this way. So you were presenting information to them in the way that they were accustomed to receiving information. And so in that way, you met them where they were and you helped them understand. And without understanding, belief leads to fragile decisions. And, this is one of the things that I think we learned at Pivotal quite often. Salespeople would bring their prospects into the Pivotal office, and they would just walk through the office and they would see, all of the hubbub of activity, and it looked so exciting, and talk about pair programming, whatever, and it sounded so great. But then there was one client that they didn't actually understand what it was they were buying, but they bought very quickly. And a week later, a week after showing up on site, their engineers table flipped and left and never came back because the executives had belief without understanding the situation they were putting their development team into. And because they didn't really understand, they didn't choose the people correctly or educate those people about what situation they were walking into. Mm-hmm. So belief without understanding is a good start, but it's fragile, it's rocky, it's not a solid foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to get to some questions. So I kind of combined two topics that I wanted to talk to you about. I know you are an action-oriented woman, a woman of action.
Yes.
And so you always like to leave people with an action. What's the one thing that you would recommend? Like if somebody wants to have less drama and go farther and faster, where should they start? What's the one thing they can implement that will improve organizational life starting tomorrow?
I love this question. It's my favorite question because I want to help people right now, not just in the theoretical future. And so right now, what I would suggest is choose a meeting, choose a decision-making situation that you are currently involved in, and identify those three kinds of people. Who's the person who can say yes, or people who can say yes? The people with the subject matter expertise, and the people who have to live with the outcome. And just do that little exercise, write the list, get it down to say less than 5 people, because getting 5 people to make a decision is challenging enough. Getting 10 people to make a decision that lasts is almost impossible, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but whatever. I was born with jazz hands, so it's impossible. So make the list. See if you can whittle the list down to 5 or fewer people, and then use that model to run your decision process, whatever that happens to be, and just see if it gets better, right?
Yeah. Now, I know that at least my federal government people, when they go to do that, they're going to be like 5, less than 5?
You mean 50.
So right. How do you communicate to people that they shouldn't go to the meeting?
So you give people roles in the meeting. You let them come to the meeting. You choose not to make a decision in the meeting. You have a second meeting that is with just the decision makers, but you give the people. So there's a reason that every one of those people thinks that they rightly belong in that room. And so you have to figure out what is the reason they think that. Is that going to add value? Give them something to do. Often the thing to do is give your input to the person who's representing that piece. So it's like if it's 10 subject matter experts or 5 different people who have to live with the outcome, or what have you. So it's not about giving them busy work to do. It's about helping everybody participate effectively in a way that is not going to make it harder to make progress.
All right. I think we can all live with that.
Yay.
I hope they can live with it. Paul Gaffney had a very different answer. He had like a similar vibe about getting people out of meetings, but he just wanted to get them out.
Yeah. Well, so when you're in Paul Gaffney's, he sits at the top of the pile, right? And I think most of us don't sit at the top of the pile. We're trying to make progress because despite sitting somewhere in the middle, right? Often the change makers are the middle people, right? Because we're the ones who see the stuckness and we live with the pain. And so we want to fix the problem, but we're not Paul Gaffney. Paul Gaffney is the executive vice president or, business unit CEO or entire CEO, right? And so he can just sweep, wave his hand, but that's not how most work and leadership gets done.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's a good thing to keep in mind too, because I think a lot of times we accept powerlessness and don't realize there's a lot of things you can do even if you're not at the top of the organization. And so I could either go work for Janice or Paul, or I can politely tell people not to come to the pre-meeting that we have.
But don't call it a pre-meeting.
Yeah, no, I won't do that.
No.
Okay, and then questions. So Ariel had asked, going back to the topic of design, how can we better advocate for design? You mentioned you had some techniques, so maybe this would be a good time to get into that and demonstrate its value among teams.
So that's going to vary. The answer is going to vary culturally pretty widely, depending on what the reputation of design is. Often, so I am not in the design field, so I'm not up to date on what the discussion is around this conversation right now. I left the practice of design when I started my second startup in 2007. But coming out of a design background, what I believe is that often designers haven't yet learned to speak the language of the product managers, the developers, the business people, and I have seen design teams kind of almost voluntarily, deliberately not understand them. And so what happens is there's an erosion of respect, mutual respect. And I have seen designers approach conversations as if they have to defend themselves from the start. So obviously this is not universal. This was my experience as a leader in organizations that have designers. And so my advice is always learn to speak business, learn to respect that other people on the team have different, equally important, sometimes more important needs out of a direction or a decision. And so the foundation of effective partnership, of working with, not at, is mutual respect and trust in others' motivations. So I think that it's more of an interpersonal relationship challenge than a knowledge challenge or how to package information challenge or have a better rational conversation about the ROI of design, which, by the way, I did 2 years of research into back in like 2002, 2003. Like the ROI of design, of user experience, of product design, like is a real conversation to have, but you cannot have that conversation meaningfully unless there is deep mutual respect, because otherwise their receptiveness is zero to whatever you're saying.
Okay. I like that answer. We have a question from Dan Ward.
Dan!
A fellow author. Actually, let me see here. I've got Fire and Simplicity Cycle right up there.
There you go.
Soon to have Farther, Faster, and Far Less Drama as a feature. What's something from the book writing process that surprised you?
Oh boy, so many surprises. So one of the things that I have realized is that being an author, so Jason and I wrote the book together. The content really is a blend of the two of us, but on the author job point of view, like I'm the one who really has made this my job. Jason still has a very rewarding day job. And I am an amateur at pretty much everything I have to do. Like I'm 57. I'm used to having mastery over my work. And suddenly now I'm like, how do I make MailChimp and Eventbrite play nice together? I have no idea. So the most surprising thing was how much of a beginner I am at so many things that I'm now called on to do. So for instance, this live stream is the very first live stream I've ever done in my life. So I love it. I'm having fun. It's a great conversation. But I don't like learning things, it turns out. And, it's really funny. I'm laughing at myself because, I've spent the last 8 years helping executives in large organizations, Fortune 100, Fortune 50 type companies and, federal government, help them adopt a growth mindset. And I thought, I've got a growth mindset, no problem. Right? So I'm making them super uncomfortable, asking them to grow and change and do things they've never done before. And now it's my turn. So those fingers are pointing right back at me. And so that surprised me. I was not really prepared for it to feel like a career change.
I love that. That's such a great way to end this too. I think, when I look at your 4 leadership motions, all 4 of them, more than anything, especially leveraging the brains, require a level of humility. Humility's gotten a bad rap because you look at the dictionary definition, you know, it's like the meek, you know, not, no, like humility
it's the strong.
yeah. And I feel like it might have been a Christian author, maybe C.S. Lewis, said something to the effect of humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. And so really thinking about others, being able to empathize with them and realizing, you know, you don't always have the answers. You don't always have the mastery to do some of the things you need to do. And I think it's just a fantastic way to orient honestly. Before you can orient to anything else, you have to orient to yourself. And
yes. Well, and all of this applies to ourselves first. And we make this point in the book. We're like, you have to start with yourself. You have to, you know, if I can't orient honestly in myself, like how can I lead a group to orient honestly? So.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. One just reminder to everyone, hop over to the Prodacity website. That's rise8.us/events/Prodacity. You can register for updates. You can see Janice's talk from 2022. And Janice, do you want to tell them when and where they can find your book?
So the book launch date is April 11th, but you can pre-order it now. Anywhere that you like to buy books. You can go to your local bookstore. You can go to Amazon. I don't need to give billionaires more money, but it is there. And I encourage all of you to buy it and review it and tell us whether you love it or hate it. Yeah, thank you for letting me plug that.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate you all for joining. And we'll see you at the next one. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome. Bye-bye, everybody.